The small hall in Chennai was full that evening. A group of local officials had gathered to celebrate a new tech initiative. There were lights, banners, cameras, and people dressed in fine clothes. Everyone was smiling. Everyone, except one woman, Lakshmi Pichai, sat quietly near the back. She wore a simple cotton sari and held a small cloth bag in her lap. She didn't speak much. She never liked crowds, but someone had invited her, an old teacher who said her presence would mean a lot. After all, she was the mother of Sundar Pichai, one of the most respected tech leaders in the world. She didn't expect to be the center of attention. She didn't want it. She only came to support the teacher, to honor the school that once shaped her son's dreams. She didn't even tell Sundar she was attending, but not everyone in the room treated her with quiet respect. About 15 minutes into the program, a local businessman stepped on stage. His name was Ramesh. He was wealthy, loud, and known for his sharp tongue. He had just donated computers to the local school, and now spoke as if he built the future with his own 2 hands. He laughed, waved at the cameras, and then suddenly said, "And look who we have here." The mother of Sundar Pichai herself, sitting right there in the back row. Such a humble seat for such a famous connection. Some people chuckled. Lakshmi's face stayed still. She nodded politely. Ramesh wasn't finished. "You know, I heard. She still takes the auto rickshaw to the market," he said with a grin. "Maybe she can teach us all about simplicity. Or maybe she just likes the attention." This time, the laughter was louder. A few people clapped awkwardly. Others looked away, uncomfortable. Lakshmi lowered her eyes. Her hands gripped the cloth bag tighter. She didn't stand up. She didn't reply. She had grown used to small insults over the years, the kind that didn't leave bruises but lingered deep inside. She didn't come here to be praised or mocked. She came because she believed in quiet presence. But that silence carried weight, and in the crowd, it moved someone. In the corner of the hall, unnoticed by most, a young woman stepped out and made a call. She wore a small smile as she whispered into the phone, "Sir, it's happening again. I think you need to know." 15 minutes passed. Then 20. And just as the next speaker began, the doors at the back opened. A wave of soft whispers followed. As people turned, the room changed. The energy shifted. A tall, quiet man walked in, dressed simply, but with purpose in every step. No bodyguards, no big announcement, just him. Sundar Pichai. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He walked straight toward the back row and gently placed his hand on his mother's shoulder. Lakshmi looked up, surprised. Her eyes welled with quiet tears, not from pain, but from the power of being seen. The room fell silent. Sundar walked past the crowd, straight to the stage. Ramesh stuttered, unsure of what to do. The mic was still in his hand. Sundar took it. He looked at the audience. His voice was soft but strong. "I heard someone speaking about simplicity, about humility," he said, pausing as his eyes scanned the hall. "Let me tell you something about that woman in the back row. She gave up meals so I could have school books. She stitched clothes so I could wear clean shirts. She stood in line for hours so I could have a fair chance at college. And she never once asked for recognition." There was a long silence. Not even a phone rang. "You speak of autos in markets like they are jokes," Sundar continued. "But my mother taught me that dignity doesn't come from what you wear, how you travel, or where you sit. It comes from who you are when no one is watching." People were still. A few looked down. Others bit their lips, embarrassed. Ramesh tried to interrupt, but Sundar calmly handed the mic to the organizer and walked back. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult anyone. He simply stood where he was needed, beside the woman who once stood alone. Lakshmi didn't say a word, but her hand gently touched his, and in that moment, no words were needed. The rest of the event went on, but the energy never returned to what it was. People watched Lakshmi differently now. not as someone to mock or quietly overlook, but as someone to learn from. Outside, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Lakshmi and Sundar walked to a small car waiting by the gate. As they sat down, Sundar looked at her and said, "Amma, I will always come when you need me, even if you never say a word." She smiled softly. "You already did, Kanna. You always do." And then, just as they began to drive away, a boy ran up to the window. He looked no older than 10. He had a notebook in hand and tears in his eyes. "Sir, can I become like you?" he asked. Sundar rolled down the window and pointed gently to Lakshmi. "Ask her," he said. "She's the reason I became anything at all." And as the car drove off into the quiet Chennai night, the boy stood frozen, holding his notebook against his chest, not just because he met someone famous, but because he had seen something powerful, something real. He had seen what it looked like when someone finally stood up, not with anger, not with pride, but with love. The morning after the event, the city of Chennai buzzed. Newspapers ran headlines with quiet awe. Pictures of Sundar beside his mother filled the internet. Social media was flooded with words like inspiration, respect, and true values. But Lakshmi, pichai, just went about her usual routine. She swept the front yard, watered her tulsi plant, and made tea the way she always did, strong, without sugar, just like her son liked it when he was younger. But inside her small home, something had changed. A letter lay on the table. Not a fancy one, just plain white, folded neatly. It came from the school Sundar once attended. The principal wrote that they wanted to honor Lakshmi at a special ceremony, to thank her for the example she had set for all mothers. Lakshmi didn't know what to think. She wasn't used to all this attention. She didn't seek it. But she remembered what Sundar had said the night before. "Amma, I will always come when you need me." Still, a question stayed in her heart. Why now? Why did people wait so long to see what was already in front of them? Meanwhile, Sundar was back in his office in Delhi. Meetings, calls, reports, the usual busy day. But his mind kept going back to his mother. He remembered the times she had waited outside school, in the rain, the way she sat beside the kerosene stove during power cuts, cooking dal with her hands full of burns. She never complained. She never asked for more. Yet the world around her always demanded more from her and gave so little back. Sundar picked up his phone and called the old school principal, a kind man named Venk. He had gray hair now and walked with a stick, but his voice still had warmth. "Sir, I have a request," Sundar said. "Anything for you," Beta Venkatesh replied. "Don't just invite my mother. Invite all the mothers in that neighborhood, the ones who sew clothes, who work in kitchens, who carry water every morning. They're the reason kids like me dream big. Let this ceremony be about all of them." Venkatesh paused. His voice cracked a little. "It will be done. You have my word." A few days later, in a small hall, not far from Lakshmi's home, a different kind of event took place. No banners with sponsors, no expensive lights, just simple flowers, soft music, and rows of wooden chairs. Lakshmi walked in wearing her plain green sari. Her hair was neatly tied, her sandals worn out from years of walking. She wasn't expecting applause, but when she stepped through the door, something happened. All the children stood up. One by one, they clapped. Not loud, not forced, just a soft, steady rhythm of respect. Lakshmi's eyes filled with tears, not because she was proud, but because she was moved by how gently they welcomed her. She saw rows of mothers sitting together. One held a sleeping baby. Another had flower stains on her sari from rushing after work. A third looked shy, unsure if she belonged there. Lakshmi walked to them, folded her hands, and said quietly, "We all belong." Then Sundar entered. He didn't speak from a stage. He didn't sit in front. He walked around the hall, greeting each mother with folded hands, listening to their stories. One woman said, I wake at 4 to make food for my sons before work. Another said, I sold my bangles to buy books for my daughter. Each story was simple, but none of them were small. Then came the moment that stayed in everyone's heart. A small girl stood up. She looked about 9 years old, with big eyes and nervous hands. She held a picture of a woman bending over a stove. The drawing was rough, but the emotion was strong. This is my Amma, she said. She can't come today because she is working in someone's house, but I want you to know, she is my hero. The room was silent. Lakshmi stood and walked to the girl. She bent down and hugged her. Then Sundar took the mic, just for a moment. My Oma once told me, he said, when people forget your name, your values will still speak. Today, this hall is full of values, of courage, of love. We don't need stages to honor our mothers. We just need to remember their sacrifices. There was no clapping after he finished, only tears. But not everyone liked the attention Sundar and his mother were receiving. Across town, in a large office filled with glass walls and polished desks, a powerful man watched the video clip from the event. His name was Manoj Varma, a local businessman who once tried to start a tech hub with the help of political allies. He was the kind of man who liked being the loudest voice in the room. And now, people were talking more about Lakshmi pichai than about his projects. He didn't like that. He leaned back in his chair and said, It's time someone reminded Sundar, who really runs things here. His assistant looked nervous. Sir, he is. Well, he's Sundar Pichai. Manoj smiled coldly. And I'm someone who knows how to shake the ground under his feet. The next day, a rumor spread. Someone posted an old photo online. It showed Lakshmi standing outside a government building, holding a torn application form. The post claimed she had once begged for a job and was denied. The caption read, From rejected to respected. But what really happened? People began sharing it, adding their own stories, twisting facts, asking questions that didn't need answers. Lakshmi saw the photo. Her hands trembled, but she didn't speak. Sundar saw it too. His jaw clenched, but his eyes stayed calm. He didn't respond publicly. Not yet. Instead, he walked to his bookshelf, pulled out an old notebook, and turned to a page where Lakshmi had written a line years ago. If they don't see your light, don't dim it, just shine brighter. He closed the notebook and picked up his phone. The time had come to do more than just speak. He was going to show the world what quiet strength truly looked like. By the time Sunday morning came, Lakshmi Pichai's name was all over the internet. The old photo had gone viral. People started digging into her past, twisting small truths into loud questions. Some said she had failed to raise her son alone. Others accused her of using Sundar's success to gain sympathy. It was ugly, unfair, painful. Lakshmi stayed silent. She didn't reply to any message. She didn't step out of her home. She swept the floor, fed the birds, watered her plants, and prayed with quiet hands. But even her prayers carried a heaviness. Now, Sundar watched it all from his apartment window. The city below looked calm, but he could feel the storm above it. News channels were debating whether Sundar's emotional speech had been a calculated move. Influencers were creating videos with dramatic titles. Even some local politicians had begun to comment, saying things like, "We respect mothers, but fame should not erase the truth." He sat at his desk, not as a CEO, but as a son. And he thought, is this what happens when you speak from the heart? When you stand beside the one who never asked for anything in return? But then he remembered his mother's eyes when he touched her shoulder in that hall, calm, strong, unshaken. He picked up his phone and called Neria, his childhood friend, who now worked as a documentary filmmaker. "Can you come to Chennai?" he asked. "When?" she replied. "Tonight," he said. "I need your lens to tell a story, not mine, Uma's." That evening Neria arrived with a small camera crew. She brought no fancy lights, no makeup team, just a microphone, a tripod, and deep respect. They didn't go to any studio. They went straight to Lakshmi's house. Nirya sat on the floor beside Lakshmi, barefoot, respectful. "Auntie, we want to hear your story," she said softly. "Not the one others are making up. The real one." Lakshmi hesitated. She looked at Sundar. He didn't speak. He just nodded, as if to say, "Only if you want to." After a long pause, Lakshmi spoke. Her voice was slow, but steady. She didn't defend herself. She didn't try to sound wise. She just spoke like a mother who had lived through hard days and soft hopes. She spoke about growing up in a small village, how she walked 3 kilometers to school and often went without lunch. She spoke about marrying young, losing her husband early, and raising Sundar with very little money, but endless love. "I didn't know what Google was," she said with a shy smile. "But I knew my son liked to ask questions." The room was silent. She showed them the old stove where she cooked for years, the corner of the room where Sundar once studied by candlelight, the tree outside where she hung his wet school uniform each night. "I never thought my story mattered," she whispered. "But now, ... maybe some other mother will feel seen." Nirya recorded it all. Every wrinkle on Lakshmi's hands, every pause between her words. It wasn't drama, it was truth. The next morning, the documentary was uploaded online. Its title was simple: Amma, the strength behind Sundar Pichai. Within hours, it spread like fire, but this time, not through gossip, not through hate, but through gratitude. Celebrities shared it. Students cried watching it. Working mothers across the world wrote long comments, thanking Lakshmi for speaking up. "This reminds me of my mom," one person wrote. "She said what I always wanted to tell my children." Another posted, "The tide had turned. Even the same news channels that once questioned her were now running emotional segments about the power of motherhood." But one man was not happy. Manoj Varma sat in his office, eyes on the screen, fists tight. He flipped the story, he said angrily. He turned pain into power. Again, his assistant looked nervous. "Sir, maybe we should stop. People are calling you out now." "No," Manoj said coldly. "Now we go deeper. Let's see how they handle a storm they can't control." That night, a fake news article appeared online. It claimed that Lakshmi had once been involved in a property dispute, that she had hidden wealth from her son, that her humble image was a lie. This time, they didn't use old photos. They created fake documents. The lies were sharper now, more dangerous. But Sundar was ready. He had already asked his legal team to investigate the source of the original rumor. And now, they traced the digital trail back to a fake account, which led, eventually, to someone working under Manoj Varma's company. Sundar didn't get angry. He didn't post rants. Instead, he called a press conference. Journalists gathered. Quickly. Cameras flashed. People expected him to attack, to name names, to fight fire with fire. But he did something else. He brought his mother with him. Lakshmi stood beside him, holding his arm. Sundar looked into the camera and said, "Truth doesn't need defense, it only needs time." Then he opened a folder and showed the real records, property papers, school certificates, old bills, everything in perfect order. "This," he said, "is who she is. Not the stories, not the noise. Just a mother who raised a son with honesty, strength, and love." The room was quiet. Then a young female journalist asked, "Mr. Pichai, why bring her here today?" Sundar looked at Lakshmi. Because for too long, she stood alone. Not anymore. Hours later, Manoj Varma was summoned for questioning. His name appeared in headlines, but not the way he wanted. His plan had failed, because he underestimated something powerful: the quiet courage of a mother, and the silent fire of a son who refused to let her be disrespected. In the days that followed, Sundar received letters from across the world, from children, from mothers, from teachers. But one letter stood out. It was written by a man who said, "My mother used to shine shoes on the street. I always felt ashamed, but after hearing your story, I held her hand today for the first time in public. Thank you." Sundar showed the letter to Lakshmi. She smiled, folded it, and placed it near her prayer lamp. "This is enough," she said. But the story wasn't over yet, because the school where it all began was planning something no one expected, and it would bring Lakshmi Pichai to a place she never dreamed of standing. The phone call came early in the morning. Lakshm. I was in the kitchen, making tea, when the landline rang. She walked over, wiped her hands on her sari, and picked it up. On the other end was Principal Venkatesh. "Lakshmi Uma," he said warmly. "We want you to come to the school next Sunday." She smiled. "Yes, I can come, sir. Is there something I need to bring?" Venkatesh paused. "Just yourself," he said softly. "We want to honor you, and not just you. We're naming the school's new library after you." Lakshmi stood still, hand on her heart. "Me," she whispered, double quotes. "Yes," he said. "Because behind every great mind, there is a story of struggle, and yours must not be forgotten." When Sundar heard about the ceremony, he cleared his schedule. No meetings, no flights, no speeches. He booked a ticket and returned to Chennai, but this time, he didn't come to rescue anyone. He came to celebrate. The news spread fast. Sundar Pichai's mother to be honored at her son's old school. The headline made people pause, smile, and reflect. In every home across the neighborhood, people talked about it over breakfast. Some mothers stitched new saris. Children drew posters with bright colors. Even the local bus drivers offered free rides to anyone attending the event. It wasn't just a ceremony. It became a movement. On Sunday morning, the sun rose early. The sky was soft orange, and the air smelled like fresh flowers. Lakshmi wore a cream-colored sari with a green border. She had worn it only once before, the day Sundar got his first job. She combed her hair, put on her simple earrings, and looked into the mirror. She didn't see pride. She saw gratitude. When she reached the school gate, hundreds of people were already there. Students, teachers, mothers, fathers, shopkeepers, even strangers who had seen her story online. They clapped gently as she entered. Not like fans, like family. Inside the school hall, the stage was decorated with books and jasmine flowers. A large sign read, "The Lakshmi Pichai Library, where dreams begin." Lakshmi's hands trembled as she saw it. Sundar stood beside her, smiling quietly. The principal stepped forward. "Today," he said, "we honor a woman who taught the world that strength doesn't come from loud voices or big speeches, but from quiet hands and soft hearts." The students performed a short play based on Lakshmi's life. It showed a mother walking her son to school, cooking late into the night, teaching him to dream bigger than their roof. Many people wiped their tears. Some didn't even try to hide them. Then came the moment everyone waited, for Lakshmi was called to the stage to say a few words. She held the microphone, looked at the sea of faces, and paused. "I never thought my name would be on a library," she began, her voice trembling. "I didn't do anything special. I just did what mothers do." The crowd was still. I walked through hard days. I cried in silence. I smiled when there was no reason. But I always believed that kindness is never wasted. Today, seeing all of you here, I know that belief was right. Then she turned to the students and said, "Read every book. Ask every question. And never forget your Oma, even when the world tries to." Everyone stood. No one asked them to. They just rose, as if pulled by something bigger than ceremony, something called respect. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to leave, a group of reporters waited outside. One of them stepped forward and asked Lakshmi, "How does it feel to finally be seen?" Lakshmi smiled. I was always seen, just not by the loud ones. Then she pointed to a young girl in a blue dress standing near the wall. The girl had come alone, holding a small notebook. Lakshmi walked to her and said, "You look like someone who wants to ask a question." The girl nodded shyly. "Amma says dreams are for rich people. Is that true?" Lakshmi knelt beside her and said, "No, Kanna, dreams are for hungry hearts. Rich or poor doesn't matter. If you carry kindness, your dreams will find their way." The girl's eyes lit up. She hugged Lakshmi tightly, and the cameras captured it, but far away. In a quiet office with tall windows, Manoj Varma watched the ceremony on his screen. His face was hard. His phone buzzed. A message from his lawyer. "We're being investigated. Multiple complaints. Documents being reviewed." He didn't respond. He just stared at the image of Lakshmi and the little girl, and for the first time, his pride began to crack. Not from fear, but from something worse. Irrelevance. He had tried to shame a mother, and the world turned her into a symbol. That evening, Sundar and Lakshmi sat on the school steps. The children had gone. The crowd had left. Only the sound of birds in the wind remained. "Amma," Sundar said, "do you feel proud?" Lakshmi looked at the name on the building. "I feel peaceful," she said. "It's better than pride." Then she turned to him. "But remember, Kanna, all this praise, ... it comes and goes. What stays is how you treat people when no one is clapping." Sundar nodded. Double quotes, "I will never forget," he said. Lakshmi reached into her bag and pulled out an old, folded paper. It was a drawing, Sundar, made when he was 5. A stick figure of her standing beside a tree with the words, "My best friend Amma," written in broken spelling. "You gave me this once," she said, smiling. "Now I give it back. Because you stood beside me when no one else did." He took the paper, held it gently, and closed his eyes. But just as the moment settled, a teacher ran toward them, holding her phone. Double quotes, "Sir, you need to see this," she said breathlessly. She showed him a live video stream. The president of a global education summit had just mentioned Lakshmi Pichai in his keynote speech, saying that the world needs more stories like hers, and more mothers like her. People from 20 countries were watching. Sundar looked at his mother. Lakshmi whispered, "Now I'm really scared." Sundar laughed. "Don't worry, Amma, I'm standing right here." And for once, she didn't stand alone. 3 days later, a quiet knock came at Lakshmi Pichai's door. It was a young woman holding a sealed envelope. She wore a badge from the National Ministry of Education and spoke gently, with deep respect. "Ma'am," she said, "we've been asked to deliver this personally." Lakshmi took the envelope with both hands. The woman smiled, bowed slightly, and left inside. The letter was printed on fine paper with a golden border. The words were simple, but powerful. "You are invited to be the chief guest at the National Educators Conference in New Delhi." Lakshmi stared at the letter for a long time. Her hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from disbelief. She had never boarded a plane, never spoken at a public event larger than a school function. She had never even imagined standing before a national audience. But now, they were asking her to speak, not because she had degrees, not because she held a title, but because she raised a son who carried her values into the world and never forgot where they came from. Sundar read the letter and looked at his mother. "Amma, we'll go together," he said softly. She hesitated. "What if I forget my words? What if I say the wrong thing?" He smiled. "Then say it in your way. People don't remember perfect speeches. They remember honest hearts." On the day of the flight, Lakshmi stood at the airport in a simple, blue sari. She clutched her small handbag tightly, filled only with prayer beads, a comb, and a folded handkerchief. As they boarded the plane, she whispered, "It's so high up. Kanna ... Sundar chuckled. "Don't worry. I'll hold your hand the whole way." As the plane lifted off, Lakshmi looked out the window, eyes wide with wonder. Below her, the city she had walked barefoot through for years became smaller and smaller. "Look, Kanna," she whispered, "the world is so big, ... And I was scared of stepping out of my lane." Sundar smiled. "Uma, even the sky is small compared to your courage." The conference was held in a grand auditorium in New Delhi. Red carpets, television crews, dignitaries from around the world, names like presidents, chancellors, ministers, all listed on the welcome board. But at the very top, in bold letters, was written, "Chief guest, Lakshmi Pichai, mother of inspiration." When she stepped into the hall, the entire audience stood, not for her name, not for her fame, but for her truth, as she walked toward the stage. Holding Sundar's hand, the lights felt too bright, the space felt too big. Her legs trembled slightly, but her spirit was steady. Sundar guided her to the podium. Lakshmi took a deep breath. The microphone waited, and then, in a soft voice, she began. "I never thought I would stand in a place like this," she said. "I never dreamed of speaking to such big people. I am not educated in the way you are, but I do know something. I know what it means to build dreams with small coins and broken shoes." The audience leaned in. My son was not raised in comfort. He was raised in love, in values, in small rooms full of big hopes. She paused, looked at Sundar, and continued. "He used to ask questions all day. Sometimes I didn't know the answers, but I always said, 'Go find out.' That was my way of teaching." People smiled. Some wiped their eyes. Today, many mothers like me sit in silence. They think their work is invisible, but it is not. Every food box packed with love, every uniform washed late at night, every tear wiped without being seen, it all matters. The crowd was still. Then Lakshmi folded her hands and said, "I accept this honor not for myself, but for every mother who has ever felt forgotten. Today, we are remembered." The room erupted in applause, not the kind meant for power, the kind meant for truth. After the speech, Lakshmi and Sundar sat in a private lounge. She held a cup of tea, still shaken by the applause. "Do you think I did okay?" she asked. "Amma," Sundar said, "you didn't just speak, you healed people." She smiled shyly, and then her face turned serious. "Kanna," she said, "not everyone clapped from the heart. Some did it for show. Don't forget that." He nodded. "I know." Then she leaned closer. "I saw someone in the front row, a man with sharp eyes. He didn't clap." Sundar paused. "Was he wearing a gray suit?" She nodded. "That's Minister Arvind. He and Manoj Varma are close." Lakshmi sighed. "I don't like the way he looked at you. It was not respect." Sundar frowned, thinking. A moment later, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Nurye. "Just got a tip. Someone's trying to dig into your mother's past again." This time, politically, he stared at the message, then looked at his mother. "Oma," he said slowly, "we're not done yet." The next day, a new rumor began to rise. Whispers in media circles suggested Lakshmi had once worked as a domestic helper for a local politician, and that she had been dismissed over a misunderstanding. They didn't say what the misunderstanding was. Just left the word hanging, heavy and cruel. Lakshmi was quiet when she read the article. She didn't cry. She just looked at Sundar and said, "Let them say what they want. The truth doesn't burn." But Sundar wasn't willing to stay silent this time. He called Nirya. He called his legal team. He called the school principal. Then he called a woman named Ravathi. Ravathi had once worked with Lakshmi, years ago. They cleaned houses side by side. Now she ran a community center for working women. Ravathi answered the call with joy. "I remember your Oma like it was yesterday. Strong as stone, soft as butter." She gave her lunch to a child once, and worked the whole day hungry. Sundar asked her, "Will you speak publicly? Will you tell the truth?" Ravathi replied, For your Ummah, I'll walk through fire. The next morning, a video went live. Revathi sat in her small office, surrounded by photos of working women. She spoke clearly. They're calling Lakshmi Pichai a liar. They're saying she hid her past. Well, I was part of that past. And I'm telling you, her truth is gold. She spoke about their days cleaning floors, making tea, walking barefoot in the rain. She spoke about Lakshmi's honesty, her strength, her silence that always spoke more than words. You can't break a woman like that, she said, because she's already built herself back too many times. The video went viral again, but this time, no one dared to twist it, because truth had faces now, voices proof. That night, Sundar sat beside his mother as she folded clothes. Amma, he said, the world tried to pull you down again. Lakshmi smiled. They've been trying since I was a girl. He looked at her, confused. You never told me? You never asked, she said gently. He laughed, and then, seriously, he said, I think it's time you told your whole story, not just parts of it. Lakshmi looked up. You mean, a book? Yes, he said, not for fame, for truth, for all the mothers who are still unheard. Lakshmi didn't reply. She just nodded, and somewhere deep in her heart, she knew the time had come. A few weeks later, the first words of Lakshmi Pichai's story were typed by her own hand. She sat at her small wooden table, an old fan spinning above, and wrote slowly, one sentence at a time. She wrote, not with the aim to impress, but to remember, to give voice to the silent pain and quiet victories that shaped her life. The book was called Between the Silence and the Light. Sundar smiled when he saw the title. Amma, it sounds like poetry. Lakshmi replied, that's what struggle feels like, Kana. Silence when you suffer, light when you survive. The pages of her book were filled with small memories, burning her fingers on hot pots, walking long distances for kerosene, hiding tears when Sundar asked for toys she couldn't afford. She didn't leave out the hard parts. She wrote about being insulted while working in people's homes, being called less because of the clothes she wore, the shoes she didn't have. But she also wrote about kindness, neighbors who shared food without asking, a stranger who once gave her shelter during a storm, and a teacher who believed in Sundar when no one else did. Each chapter carried the weight of a woman who had walked through fire and still held flowers in her hands. The manuscript was printed by a small publisher who read it and wept. This isn't just a book, he told Sundar. It's a mirror. It shows people the mothers they forgot to thank. The book was launched without grand events, no spotlights, no red carpet, just a simple event in the school library named after her. But that didn't stop it from reaching the world within days. The book climbed bestseller lists, universities added it to their reading shelves. Schools asked Lakshmi to speak to their students. Working women started book clubs with her name, and more important than all, children went home, hugged their mothers, and said thank you. One morning Lakshmi received a letter. This time, it was not from the government, not from an event manager, but from a young girl named Aisha in a small village. The letter read, Dear Lakshmi Ummah, I used to feel ashamed of my mother because she washes dishes in other people's homes. But after reading your book, I walked up to her and said, Amma, you are my hero. She cried. I cried, and now we smile every day. Thank you for helping me see her. Lakshmi held the letter close to her chest. She didn't need applause. This one letter was enough, but just when everything felt peaceful, another unexpected moment arrived. A global women's leadership summit sent her an invitation. They wanted to honor her with the Voice of Courage Award, not for her son's success, but for her own. Lakshmi looked at Sundar. Me? She asked again. He laughed. Amma, when will you stop asking that? She smiled. When the world stops surprising me. At the ceremony, held in Singapore, powerful women from across the globe spoke, CEOs, leaders, artists. And then came Lakshmi, in her green silk sari, holding her small bag like always. She walked up to the stage, and instead of giving a long speech, she said just this: "I don't know how to run a company. I don't know how to build a satellite. But I do know how to stand in a kitchen with empty hands and still make a child believe in magic. If that counts as strength, then I accept this award for every woman who ever hid her power behind a quiet smile." The room stood still, and then exploded in applause. That night, Sundar and Lakshmi sat at a small outdoor cafe by the sea. She stirred her tea and watched the waves crash softly against the rocks. "Kana," she said, "you always stood beside me, even when I had no voice." He replied, "Amma, you always had a voice. The world just didn't know how to listen." She looked at him, eyes shining. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything, when I'm gone someday. Tell my story without fear. Not just the sweet parts, the full truth." He nodded slowly. "I promise." Years passed. Lakshmi's book became part of national curriculum. A film was made based on her life. Girls were named after her. And every year, on Mother's Day, millions remembered her words. But Lakshmi remained the same. She still swept her yard every morning, still prayed at the same old shrine, still gave sweets to the neighborhood children. And Sundar, no matter how big his meetings became, no matter which leader he spoke to, every week, he called her. Even if it was just for 5 minutes, even if it was just to say, "Oma, I'm standing beside you, always." One day, when Lakshmi was older and needed help to walk, a young reporter visited her. "Ma'am," she asked softly, "what do you think your legacy is?" Lakshmi smiled. "Not the library, not the awards, not even the book." The reporter looked confused. "Then what?" Lakshmi looked out the window, where a mother was walking her son to school. "My legacy," she said, "is every mother who was once ignored and now stands tall because she finally knows she matters." And outside, as the sun rose slowly over Chennai, a quiet truth settled in the sky like golden light. No one had stood up for Lakshmi Pichai at first, but in the end, the whole world did, because her silence taught us something louder than any speech ever could. The years moved forward like pages in a book. Lakshmi Pichai was no longer just a name, she was a symbol. Her story, once hidden in the quiet corners of a humble Chennai home, now echoed through classrooms, speeches, films, and family dinners around the world. But time, as it does with all, began to slow her down. Her hands, once strong enough to cook, clean, and carry the weight of her family's hopes, began to tremble. Her walks to the tulsi plant grew shorter. Her eyesight faded just a little more each day, but her spirit, it never dimmed. She still smiled when she saw children laugh. She still blessed strangers who helped others. And she still whispered, always, "Be kind to every person who entered her home." One afternoon, as the jasmine flowers bloomed and the air was still, Lakshmi sat with Sundar in the garden. She wore a soft cotton shawl. Her hair was fully white now, tied in a simple braid. Sundar sat close, holding a photo album. They looked through old pictures, one of Sundar standing with a medal in school, one of Lakshmi holding a bag of groceries and smiling wide, one of the small clay stove where she used to cook. Lakshmi chuckled softly. "I remember burning the rice that day," she said, pointing at a photo. "You didn't complain." "I never complained because I loved the burnt part," Sundar said. "Liar," she laughed, tapping his hand. They sat in silence for a while. Then Lakshmi asked, "Kana, if I leave one day, will people still remember?" Sundar held her hand tighter. "Amma, they don't just remember. They carry you, in their hearts, in their homes, in their choices." She nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "But more than remembering me, they should remember what matters." "What matters most?" Sundar asked. Lakshmi looked into the fading sky and whispered, kindness without expectation. A few months later, the world woke to quiet news. Lakshmi Pichai, mother of inspiration, passes peacefully in her sleep. No fanfare, no spotlight, just a still image of her gentle face, and a headline that made millions pause. People across countries lit candles. Schools held a moment of silence. Working women posted photos of themselves with their children, thanking the woman who gave them courage. And Sundar. He stood in front of her old home in Chennai, now preserved as a community center. He wore a simple white kurta, no speech, no cameras, just him. He placed his palm on the front door and whispered, "Thank you." A week later, a special event was held in New Delhi, the Lakshmi Pichai Global Summit for Humble Leadership. Leaders from over 50 countries gathered. Every speech began with one name, every screen showed her face, and before the first speaker took the stage, a recording played. It was Lakshmi's voice, soft and warm. The world will always honor big names, but never forget the small hands that helped them rise. The audience stood. Some cried, others simply bowed their heads. But the story didn't end there. Sundar made sure it wouldn't. He launched the Lakshmi Foundation, a global movement to support single mothers, underpaid workers, and underrepresented children. The foundation offered books, shelter, and support in the name of the woman who once walked barefoot just to buy her son a pencil. Her story became part of school textbooks, not as a side note, but as a chapter titled, A Mother's Strength. Documentaries, continued films followed, but more powerful than any screen were the mothers who now stood taller because of her. In a small village near Kerala, a girl named Kavya stood in front of her classroom. She wore a simple uniform and held a worn-out book. "Today, I want to tell you about my hero," she said. The class expected her to name a famous actor or athlete, but Kavya lifted the book and said, "This is Lakshmi Pichai. She reminds me of my own Uma. We don't have much, but now I know. That's never what mattered." Her teacher smiled through tears, because Lakshmi's story didn't just inspire, it healed. It gave people permission to be proud of their roots, to honor struggle without shame, to believe that quiet love is the loudest power of all. On the anniversary of Lakshmi's passing, a statue was placed outside the school where her son once studied under a broken fan and flickering light. It showed a woman seated with a book in one hand and her other arm around a child. The plaque read, "In memory of Lakshmi Pichai, who taught the world that the greatest leaders rise from the gentlest love." Sundar visited that statue every year. He didn't bring flowers. He brought stories, stories of mothers who had written to him, of children who started studying again, of women who dared to dream in the face of despair. He would place those letters beside the statue, sit for a few minutes, and whisper, "Your love still moves mountains, Uma," and far beyond the noise of the internet, beyond headlines and speeches. Her legacy lived on in the simplest ways. A girl lending her lunch to a classmate, a boy folding clothes while his mother rested, a father telling his son, "Respect begins at home," and a young voice somewhere in the world saying, "I stand with my mother," just like Sundar Pichai did. Because once, long ago, no one stood up for Lakshmi Pichai, until one day, her son arrived, and from that moment on, the whole world stood with her.